Good evening, friends, and welcome to this evening's discussion by the Book Café of Wiscombe. It's such a pleasure to welcome all of you this evening. It's a very special event for us for two reasons. One is that Wiscombe has been in existence for nearly 25 years, and we begin our celebrations of our 25th anniversary this summer. And we thought that as part of our curtain raiser, we would have a friend, a philosopher, a woman of substance, someone we all admire and love deeply, to kind of inaugurate a series of discussions that we hold as part of our book cafe. For those of you who don't know the work of Wiscombe, and many of you already do, many friends from across borders and boundaries are here with us today. Wiscombe is an initiative, a South Asian initiative, that foregrounds the leadership of women in areas of conflict resolution and peace building. And we have had several workshops that bring young future influentials from the South Asian region together to dialogue, to open conversations, to build bridges of mutual understanding and sustained dialogue. So today, we celebrate Indira ji for her work, for being the kind of person she is, through a discussion on her latest book. It is, as all of you know, those of you who know her, it is difficult to encapsulate her many talents in a formal bio profile. But for those of you who may not know her, Indira Varma is an acclaimed author, she's a translator and a poet, and she has served as the chairperson of the Sarvodaya International Trust and honorary director, Travel Festivals of India. After having worked extensively with Citibank, Thomas Cook, she became an entrepreneur and chairperson of IV Associates Private Limited and retired from an active 9-to-5 job in 1986. She is she's a person whose home is always open to artists, to poets, to philosophers, full of brimming with ideas all the time, bringing with energy, warm, hospitable, and ever graceful. She has translated several songs, poems, and authored several books. Music, the Universal Language of the Soul, which is a handbook of 31 ragas with shabads, a prayer book of Havan mantras, Shafaq Ke Rang, Hum Umr Khayal, Romancing Tagore, a collection of 100 Tagore poems in Urdu nazms. And she has also for several years and decades, I'd say, curated the much celebrated space Sham-e-Ghazal. As I said, her home has been the hub of creativity, a haven for artists to congregate and find expression. And as someone mentioned this about her, and they said, इस अजनबी शहर में उस शख्स को कहाँ ढूंढे जो ये कहता है कि आंगन में सनोबर होगा. And that's what she provides, a kind of refuge, a kind of reinvigoration of the spirit. At the age of 83, she decided that she had to write, in a sense, a memoir called Lest We Forget, How Three Sisters Braved the Partition of India. Now, the very word partition, as Anchal Malhotra has said, has become a feeling, an experience, a history, a memory, a burden, a wound, a war, all at once. And Anchal Malhotra is a young curator who collects little bits of memories, shards of memories, little objects that people carried with them, especially women, from across the divide on the subcontinent when partition happened. Memories and histories of one of the greatest tragedies of human history, the partition of 1947, where between 14 to 18 million people crossed borders and were uprooted, and where over a million lost their lives, anchors the collective consciousness, perception, and experience of the peoples of South Asia. And partition has been represented in several ways, from the political, the social, the historical, and cultural realms in the public domain, to the fragmented memories, the shards of the past, and the silences of the familial or the private domain. Clearly, partition has seeped into the present and extends to the future, touching the generations who are still far removed from the original state of trauma. However, in the extensive literature on partition, women's voices have only recently begun to emerge and to be heard. Mainstream literature on partition, both national and subaltern historiographies, tended to portray women as subjects of community honor and their bodies as sites where honor needed to be exhibited. And this vocal masquerading relegated them to the position of objects the other. Therefore, the act of writing by women can be seen as, in some senses, a radical act of subversion. We are all familiar how Urvashi Butalia's path-breaking book, The Other Side of Silence, and Ritu Menon and Kamla Bhasin's Borders and Boundaries really broke this silence about women's testimonies. And in fact, revealed the existential experiences of women who had been silenced for so many decades after partition. As Rakshanda Jalil, a writer and a long-term friend of Indraji, has said, and I quote, "The minutiae of real lives contain stories of suffering and endurance, pain and misery, even anger and guilt, as well as vignettes of hope and renewal, of courage and conviction, of rising above the constraints of time and circumstance." And it is in this sense that Indraji's book is a different kind of memoir. It reflects resilience, compassion, and conviction amidst despair and rupture. And lest we forget, therefore, chronicles Indira Varma and her two sisters' lives from her initial years in Peshawar through the partition to her later years as a successful entrepreneur. The book is a testament to resilience, the enduring power of love and hope. And yet it is not a wide-angle lens. It brings to life the micro experiences graphically captured, the quotidian experiences, highlighting the everyday of the smell, the touch, and the feel of both joy and pain. In a sense, a Proustian remembrance of things past. It's both stream of consciousness and it's pictorial, making you actually feel the sensations as you go through the book. Partition has posed the question of belonging, of displacement, of identity, of citizenship, and lack of refuge and anchor. And as she herself has graphically said, partition has taken place over half a century ago. We have been given house and land in India, yet I have left a life behind. My family has left their lives behind, and that would never be settled. Why should roots matter? Perhaps it's not so much the question of roots as being chopped off from the original tree and having to scramble to survive elsewhere. There is no identity left of the people who came because of partition. To me, the narrative is bookended by Peshawar. And in many ways, Peshawar remains the abiding presence, the silent witness, and even the main protagonist of the book. Peshawar, historically, as we all know, is the confluence of many cultures, home to all the major religions of the world historically, ruled by Hindu, Buddhist, Muslim, Sikh, and Christian dispensations. In different incarnations, it was Pushpapura, Purushpura, Kaspatrius, Parshawar, and then finally Peshawar, where once plurality and acceptance of differences came naturally. The book traces the journey of the 7-year-old Indira from 1947, Peshawar, to its memories of a happy childhood through the adversities post-partition and the vicissitudes of life, and completes the circle, very interestingly, with another emotionally charged journey back to visit the land of her birth almost 53 years later. And that amazing moment of epiphany, she discovers for the first time, almost by accident or by chance or happenstance, that the celebrated clock tower in the center of the city had actually been a gift bequeathed to the city by her great-grandfather, Lala Balmakand Ahuja, banker and general contractor of Peshawar. It was as if destiny beckoned her back to reveal the connections that can never be set asunder. There are several such thrilling moments in the book, but I could not but remember Eliot's famous quote, "We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time." So she rediscovered this beloved Peshawar of her childhood. And she discovered also, and again a quote from Eliot, time present and past are both perhaps present in time future, and time future contained in time past, end quote. Between these bookends are, of course, the rhythms and cycles of navigating a new life, the many journeys, the descent from luxury to penury, often without food on the plate, the moves from Nainital to Kanpur to Delhi, often traumatic, the meetings, the partings, the marriages, the births, the deaths, the rites of passage, but through it all, how the love, resilience, and strength of three siblings triumphed over despair. And all this is poignantly told. In fact, the journey, suffer, is a persistent leitmotif of the book. As she has said herself, ये और बात के मंजिल पे सब नहीं जाते, सफर पे जाने का कुछ हौसला तो होना था. And I just wanted to add, जुस्तजू हो तो सफर खत्म कहाँ होता है, यूं तो हर मोड़ पे मंजिल का गुमा होता है. Even when the longed for meetings with an estranged father never materialize, and are edged poignantly, there is acceptance, although the resonance remains throughout Indraji's recent discovery of the powerful poetry of her father and her dedication to translate it in his testimony to the sense of ownership, forgiveness, and reconciliation that you see. And yet at the end, Indraji poignantly says, grief is a journey that everybody has to traverse, often alone. I don't believe in rebirths, meeting again in some life somewhere. I believe that you can keep a person alive as long as you want in your heart, in your pain, in your smile, in your writing, and in your poetry, as she has done, and in her conversations. They are indelible. So there is throughout the book the music of this soulful soliloquy. It is never a rant, never a lament, never a wail, never a dirge. And that is what makes this book so special. There is, of course, through the book, the recurring theme of the quest for identity, where the tragedy of partition had brought had wrought is that it has taken away the certainty of our roots, she says. And there are several riveting moments in this, like her being overwhelmed when seeing the Gurdwara Panja Sahib in Pakistan on her visit back in 2001, or the encounter with the regional passport officer who didn't know where to put down her place of birth in the form, since it was Peshawar and not India, and created a separate column that said Undivided India, and saying to her very gently that there are few people like you left. And in time, perhaps 2 decades later, with people will go the histories, will everything be forgotten? Who will be interested in this little story? And then she says, history is as much about the lives of ordinary people like us who have lived here, and it is about as it is about the battles won and lost, and the empires flourished and fallen. And finally, I would add, it is also about the audacity of hope, Indraji, and the spirit that can transcend the bitterness of narrowness, of boundaries, the divisiveness that separate us, to recover again the humanity that connects us. Of that, there is an abundance in this gem of a book. In the peace building field, we often grapple with this dilemma, how to strike the delicate balance, to move beyond trauma, the trauma of conflict, to build reconciliation. And how do we find the balance between collective amnesia and the perpetual cultivation of grievance? In Indraji's book, there lie many, many answers. So it's once again a pleasure to host this, to convene this, to bring all of our friends from across man-made borders and boundaries together in a communion of conversation. I would like to hand it over now to my young colleague Akash Leena, who is the curator of the Book Café and who has been riveted by this book, reading it, rereading it, engaging with it, to discover a history that went long before she was even a twinkle in her parents' eye. And after Akash Leena, my colleague Seema Kakran, whose forefathers came from across the border, will be in conversation with Indraji. So once again, I welcome all our friends to this space, to this circle, and especially our friends from Pakistan who have joined us and share in our love and our admiration of this truly remarkable woman, Indira Varma. Over to you, Akashlina. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for actually setting the context, and it's indeed a privilege, an opportunity, an honor to also have Indraji amidst us to share her stories. And I would I would actually begin with, for our generation, partition through partition has seeped into the collective consciousness, actions, activities, and perceptions, of course, but it has often been a part of the history textbooks in our school curriculums, maybe reduced to a line or a paragraph, or in the college spaces to fiction, be it Manto, Ismat Chughtai, Kuratulin Haider, or even Khadija Mastoor, where we've explored partition as the backdrop and how women have written, pieces of work or fiction in the domain of partition. And yet it was also a part of our own familial domain and private domain. As probably the third or the fourth generation of a family which has lived through partition, it was a part of my grandmother's tears on listening to her favorite dialect, or what is known as Bangal Bhasha, or her favorite food cuisine. She would often start crying, and I would not have a reason to why she would do that. And that's where we also realize that there's this selective amnesia regarding partition. It's an absence presence. It is there. It has defined how we look at ourselves, how we've defined the other, how we've defined the sense of nation state, belonging, identity. And yet, and yet it has ended up aggravating antagonisms. And unfortunately, we've inherited the memories of fear, hatred, and division with regards to partition. And unfortunately, we've also forgotten to inherit the shared vision of humanity, which I think Ashish Nandi talks about in his historic study on partition and trauma. So, this episode of the Book Café, which we've titled as Memories and Memoirs, Vignettes of Resilience, actually seeks refuge in the stories of love, hope, and resilience transcending cartographic anxieties. So, memories and memoirs are very central to the act of remembering. In a sense, this is also an act of remembering because memories are not just isolated incidents or fragments or shards of past, often stitched together in time, but those are those incidents which often throw the fixed identities into disarray and questioning. So you see the 6-year-old or the 7-year-old Indira actually questioning the way nation state, belonging, and complicated concepts of the fixed identities and geopolitical boundaries have really worked out. Because her idea of home is much beyond the way the political boundaries of the nation state has been constructed. And that's where it's so important to also deeply understand the human quotidian experience whenever we talk about the bigger notions of displacement, refuge, and other sorts of political crisis. And that's where I think the idea and the intention and the aspiration for us is how do we now inherit not just these memories of fear, hatred, and division, but memories of repair and recovery amidst rupture? And maybe this act of remembering is also the first step towards reconciliation and healing, and in face of the loss of this magnitude. So, how do we truly share these stories of compassion and conviction while building bridges across boundaries? Indiraji's book, for me, was about inheriting the vignettes of hope, resilience, friendship, compassion, and conviction. And we do hope that such spaces, cultivating such spaces of trust and work across borders and boundaries, which would help us build solidarities which transcend the cartographies of fear and suspicion. So I would not take much time any longer. I would now, and I'm delighted to actually introduce our facilitator for this conversation, Ms. Seema Kakran, who's also the Deputy Director of WISCOM. Just to briefly introduce you, Seema Ma'am, to everybody who do not know her, is Seema Ma'am is the Deputy Director at WISCOM with over 2 decades of experience of designing gender training and conducting research on issues of inclusion and diversity. She, as a specialist in public policy analysis, political theory, and evaluation methodologies, holds a graduate certificate in public policy analysis from University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and she has attended several courses in evaluation methodology. She's previously taught political science at the University of Delhi and the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and her research has focused on gender equality and socio-political conflicts in India. Thank you so much, Seema ma'am, and I would invite you to please take on this conversation.
Thank you, Akashlina. And a very warm welcome to everyone in the space. And Indraji, a very, very special thank you to you for joining us today and speaking about your book. Your work has a special personal significance for me, as indicated by Dr. Gopinath. As someone whose grandparents and parents, both paternal and maternal side, came as refugees at the time of partition, your book actually provided a rare window into what my grandparents and parents must have gone through. And I want to share here that there was seldom any conversation in my family about what had happened, how they had made the journey, how had they felt at that time. And you yourself mention in your book, and I quote, "What do things signify? The box sits in my cupboard, safely locked away with a strange-looking brown card which allowed Papa to travel to Delhi and then onwards to Nainital. a crossing Papa never spoke about. So your book deeply resonated with me because my father and my mother, my father till he was in this world, never spoke about the partition, never spoke about his experience. And my mother, while she did start to share towards the, just maybe an year before she passed on, didn't really uh, give out too much detail of what she had gone through. So what your book did was to actually give me a feel of what my parents and grandparents may have gone through. So thank you very much for that. And I'm sure that there are many others in the audience who would share that sentiment with me. But I would like you to share with us and begin by talking about what is it that motivated you to write the memoir? What is it that prompted you to write this book? Why at this time? Over to you, Indira, please. And can you please unmute yourself?
Seema, I have a very good memory, like family birthdays and other things and all. All are right in my mind here. I never forget anything. Many a times I thought of writing this book before also, but somehow, like a child has to be born at a certain time, destined to be born. The horrific pandemic happened. I had to close down my offices, and suddenly one day, I was sitting alone in office, doing nothing, not knowing what to do. At that very minute, I decided I'm going to start writing my book, which I have been wanting for so many years. So I took out my diaries. I maintained diaries throughout my life. And if you ever come to my house, I hope you will, and you will see a pile of diaries in my bedside table. And I have written many things in that other than my poetry. Seema, I can't see anyone. Or is it supposed to be like this?
I think it's so that people can see you. Otherwise, there'll be too many small little boxes.
I see. Are they able to see
pictures?
me?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Fine, thank you. So that 3 years of pandemic, I wrote. I didn't get the COVID, but I got vertigo, which I haven't been able to get rid of till today, because I typed about 80,600 words in those 3 years. My knuckles have become black because I think I overused them for my age. I started when I was 80, I finished when I was 82, and at 83, I launched the book. And I took out all the old letters and the pictures. I converted my office into a studio, reshot everything, reshot the photographs, reshot Papa's past that he bought, shikaras that we had for mother's trinkets, my grandparents, whatever they could leave, all the documentation from the police and the government, all that I had. My mother gave it to my sister gave it to me, and I took out everything and I wrote this book.
Thank you. You mentioned, and Dr. Gopinath also in the opening spoke about the idea of home, especially there's a lot of academic literature in the context of partition and refugee literature, which has given a lot of importance to the idea of home. In fact, even in popular culture, there are a lot of Bollywood films which talk about, the home across the border. In this, there's, focus on the homeland or the region where they came from, the locality, the physical structure of the house. I mean, for you, you talk about the idea of home, how you miss that home. And at the same time, I, as a reader, felt that your home refers to your social relationships that facilitate life,
No, no, no. I don't think it's the social relationship. Definitely, definitely my family, my mother, my grandmother, my grandfather. I have lived only with my nana, nani, my mother, and my two sisters. One was older than me, and one was born 3 months after the separation of my parents, I think in 1944. And to me, home is that. Like for me, home is now my children and me, even if they are not living in the same house. But still, uh, home is a sense of smell. Home is a sense of taste. Home is a sense of एक झोंका कभी कभी हवा का भी can take you home. और एक खूबसूरती खुशबू can take you home. एक अब आपको क्या बताऊं? I remember as a 6-year-old, my grandfather took me to a very small place called Pabbi. It's a small village near Peshawar called Pabbi. And when I went there, we were sitting in an open car, ye bhi mujhe yaad hai. And everywhere around, I saw mounds of dried fruit. When you talk about home, today, when I see anjeer or I see khurmani, it's home to me. So that is a place where women were sitting and making garlands of the dried fruit. That also takes me home.
While you say that, Indraji, at the same time, throughout the book, there's a palpable sense of loss of home, which one reads. Yeah, because you talk about your home in Peshawar, and then you revisit the home
yes, I
later
do.
on in life. And we love, while you talk about that experience and your sense of loss of home, for us to also see some of those photographs which you shared in the book.
Yes, I also want to say that even in the book and even now, 99.9% I confirm that was my home. But I cannot be sure 100% because it didn't look like, none of the rooms looked like that. Or none of the living room and my mother's room, which I've described in my book, looked like where I went, which had become a club. It was called the Khan Club. And it used to have 100 rooms. And this place, after partition, was divided between three brothers. I don't know, I can't see the rest of the people. If Ali Jan is there, the historian from Peshawar, travel historian, he has sent me pictures of my house and of the clock tower. Is he there? Ali Jan?
Is it possible to confirm, Akash Leena, if he's there?
No, ma'am, we can't see him right now.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. No problem.
So Indraji, you want to share something about the journey that you took back home to Peshawar and how that happened,
My husband had a lot of business in Bangladesh, and we became friends with 2-3 very warm families in Bangladesh. Some were diplomats. And after my husband's death, which was in 99, my friends told me, you need to get out of the house. And they tempted me with the idea, okay, let us take you to Pakistan. Now, I was about 59, 58 or 59, I think. And I could still walk and I could still sort of go and see things. To, I was very excited about the idea. And so the diplomats in Bangladesh, Dhaka, had cousins who were also diplomats in Islamabad. He was chief of the IMF. And Meeta Mansoor, in fact, today is her birthday. And I just sent her a greeting too. She's in America.
Please go on, Indraji. I think somebody might.
So they managed a visa for me, and two sisters from Bangladesh, me, and yet another person, we all four of us reached Meeta's house in Islamabad. First, we got down at Lahore, and from Lahore, we took a flight. It was all very, very different from India. I had been traveling a lot with my husband. I had traveled a lot when I was in Thomas Cook. I trained a lot outside. So having traveled Lufthansa, British Airways, and Air India, and other good airlines, traveling from Lahore to Islamabad, everybody had to say the prayer. It was a sort of an uncommon thing. And I saw all this, and there were no mobile phones, but I still managed to carry a phone. And there were no cameras, I meant to say. So we reached Islamabad, and from there, we made many one-day trips, two-day trips, three-day trips. And that's how I saw Lahore at the peak of Basant Mela. Then I went to Peshawar. Then I went to Murray, where my sister was born. I spoke to her from the hospital where she was born. I stood outside the hospital. We both cried. And I said, I'm standing in front of the hospital where you were born, Didi. And then I told her what all I ate, childhood memories of what all we used to eat. And of course, the visit to the house and visit to the clock tower. And then I went to Karachi, and I was invited by the governor of Karachi, the chief of Karachi there, and I sat in the same room where the partition was written and sealed. I think you all have the photographs of all these things in case you would like to show some just now.
Yeah.
This is my grandfather on the left. On the right is his elder brother. And in between is their father. And the house underneath is my great-grandfather's house. Not the house that I lived in. This is in cantonment. This is my maternal grandmother on the right, my grandfather, Sardar Manmohan Singh, my beautiful mother, Niche, and on the right hand is my father, who I knew only through pictures. I met him only when I was 16 years old. This is the shikara, a silver filigreed shikara, which used to hold my mother's trinkets. And my younger sister still has it. These binoculars I have, and there's all these little books of what to feed the pigeons, which my grandfather used to have, are still with me and will now go to the Partition Museum. This is us three sisters as little girls. My younger sister, Niche Sabse Rupi, right-hand side, the podgy me. Left-hand side is my elder sister, Didi, and me, and our companion, Kadra. This is the passbook which Papa got to travel from Peshawar and come and see us in Nainital. These are some letters authenticating what we left behind, what we were, that we owned a Rolls Royce. Yes, we owned a motorcycle and things like that, and lands and houses and havelis and things like that, properties. This is my house on the right-hand side. And this is the clock tower that my great-grandfather built. On the plaque, his name is written, Bal Mukund. He was Sir Bal Mukund Ahuja. Underneath are two pictures of Karachi, Lahore, Peshawar guest house, and this building where you can see this picture where you can see Jinnah. This is the room where the partition was signed. And these are my friends who went with me. Niche, right-hand side, is the Shalimar Gardens. I can barely see. Well, these are some of the poets and singers who have been in my life, and I have been grateful for their presence in my life. This is the Prime Minister, Sardar Manmohan Singh Ji, releasing my book, Romancing Tagore. There's Jagjit Singh Ji releasing my book, Shafaq Ke Rang. There's Hussain Saab, and there is on top Ahmed Faraz Saab releasing my book, Hum Umr Khayal. And with the then Sheila Dikshit Ji was a great music lover.
Apologies about that. Thank you, Indira, and thank you, Akashlina, for facilitating us to see those photographs. I mean, they are so deeply, we're touched by these. I mean, I'm feeling really emotional because they are your family's photographs, and still I feel that, I wish I had been also able to visit my father's home in Rawalpindi, which I never was able to. But
Seema, while we showed these photographs, Meenakshi wanted me to read a poem of mine, which is a remorse between our two countries. May I please do it now?
Please.
कभी मुड़ के फिर उसी राह पर ना तो आए तुम ना तो आए हम, कभी फासलों को समेट कर ना तो आए तुम ना तो आए हम, जो तुम्हें है अपनी अना पसंद तो मुझे भी शर्त का पास है, ये जिदों के सिलसिले तोड़कर ना तो आए तुम ना तो आए हम, उन्हीं चाहतों में बंधे हुए अभी तुम भी हो अभी हम भी हैं, है खलिश दिलों में बहुत मगर ना तो आए तुम ना तो आए हम, वो झरोके पर्दों में बंद है, झरोके मीन्स विंडोज, वो झरोके पर्दों में बंद है, वो तमाम गलियां उदास हैं, कभी ख्वाब में सरे रह गुजर ना तो आए तुम ना तो आए हम, उसी शहर की उसी मोड़ पर थे हमारे घर भी करीब पर, उसी शहर की उसी मोड़ पर थे हमारे घर भी करीब पर, यूं ही घूमते रहे हम उम्र भर, न तो आए तुम न तो आए हम, कभी इत्तेफाक से मिल गए किसी शहर के किसी मोड़ पर, तो ये कह उठेगी नजर नजर, क्यों ना आए तुम क्यों ना।
बहुत खूब, थैंक यू। आपने जब ये अपनी नज्म पढ़ी, आपकी पूरी book, when one was reading the book, there was, while there was some pain, sense of loss that one read in the book, but I'm amazed at the way you were able to keep your faith in humanity intact despite going through such difficult conditions, where you talk about your great grandfather giving the city of Peshawar the clock tower, your family owning a Rolls Royce and the huge Haveli, and coming as refugees and having very, very difficult conditions which the family had to go through. And if you give me permission, I really would love to read a small passage from the book where you say, all this at a time where you're talking about the partition, when religion mattered more to people than humanity, where the friends I had played with, the people who had taken care of me, the people who had saved my papa were somehow to be hated, where a language that everybody spoke was no longer to be ours, where the ugliness of humans was on full display, and nobody could differentiate whether the ugliness of one religion was any different from that of another. So, I mean, one is amazed that, and Dr. Gopinath.
Because Seema, this I wrote this because when one night we went hungry. We had, because my grandfather had never done anything. He was a zamindar. People just lived off their lands, as you would know. Even now, people live off their lands in the interiors. कितने farmers हैं जो अपनी खेती बाड़ी करते हैं, उन्होंने कभी कोई नौकरियां या jobs या business नहीं की है. तो my grandfather had never done anything like this. So किसी ने help करने की कोशिश करी, तो कुछ हमें बोतलें ला दी कि इसके ऊपर स्टिकर लगा दो, उससे थोड़े पैसे मिल जाएंगे, या वो डोजेस बना के लगाते थे हम शीशों के ऊपर, या कैंडल्स बना दो, तो हम कैंडल्स बनाते थे, वो बेचते थे. हम नहीं बेचते थे, जो हमें आके दे जाता था वो ले भी जाता था, और कुछ थोड़े बहुत पैसे मिल जाते थे. इसी तरह somebody told my grandfather कि जी हम आपको स्टैम्प पेपर ला के देते हैं, तो आप वो कोर्ट में जाके बेच दीजिए. तो मेरे ग्रैंडफादर बेचारे एक अजीब सी संदूक लेके जाते थे जिसमें स्टैम्प पेपर होता था, और वो कोर्ट में आपको मालूम है कि कोई भी चीज अगर ट्रांसफर वगैरह से होता है तो स्टैम्प पेपर साइन करना पड़ता है. तो ही यूज्ड टू सेल दैट, और जो भी 50-100 रुपए मिलता था उससे हमें खाना मिलता था. तो एक दिन वो भी नहीं मिला, तो एक दिन कोई स्टैम्प पेपर नहीं मिला. So that night we went hungry. Even at the launch, I explained this whole thing which was in my mind. And then who came to our help? A man who used to sit in the masjid all day long. He used to sit in the masjid and pray. He came to know a family has come and there are 3 children who went hungry last night. So उस दिन से सीमा, उस दिन से हमारे घर के बाहर कभी छोटे छोटे पैकेट दाल के, कभी चावल के, कभी नमक के, कभी छोटी छोटी लकड़ियां जिसको हम लोग पिशोरी लैंग्वेज में छोड़े कहते हैं, आग जलाई जाती है, which my grandmother put 3 bricks together and उसको जला के कभी खिचड़ी बना के खिला देते थे हमें, कभी थोड़ी सी दाल चावल खिला देते थे. So here we were fighting on the front for religion, on the basis of religion. And here was Muslim families cutting into the rations of their own children and giving us their portions. That is what I meant when I wrote this paragraph.
So powerful and so relevant for our generation, where the divides seem to have hardened so much. And since you talk about the hardship that the family went through, there's a lot of literature which talks about how conflicts lead to change in gender roles and how women become primary providers for their family.
It was necessary because, you see, when the camps were set up, all the girls were asked to work. Women, not girls. Anyone above 15, 16, all my sisters-in-law and everybody, all of them came as the refugee camps. Kingsway camp was set up, the Queensway camp was set up. So all of them used to either stitch clothes or work in hospitals as nurses, as helpers. Nursing to kya karenge wo bichariyan choti choti, but as helpers.
And you particularly talk about your older sister,
Yes.
who became the anchor and provider for your family, if you can share.
She was the hero of our family. Because at 13, she started doing tuitions. She would get 30 rupees per month per tuition. So she used to do 3 tuitions after school. So my grandfather would, hold her hand. She was only 13 years old. In convents, craft is very important. So my Didi, my sister, was very good at craft. And the nuns would recommend, where the children were weak, the nuns would recommend that you take private tuition from Uma Singh. Urmiljeet Rani Singh was her name, but we used to call her Uma. I've never called her by name. I've always called her Didi. So she used to go from one house, teach for half an hour or 45 minutes, then go to another house, then go to the third house. 3 tuitions. Her fingers used to be blue when she used to come home at night. And my grandmother would heat oil and rub on her fingers. She was thin. She never went beyond 50 kilos ever. A beauty, a classic beauty.
And imagine, coming from such a privileged family and being able to face odds with so much of
but my younger sister did no less.
Yes.
She looked after us.
And you as well, Indraji, because you talk about it later. You conjecture how, had you been in Peshawar, what the life of the 3 sisters would have been, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Would you like to share a little more for the audience who may not have read the book about?
Sorry. Very sorry.
So because you talk in the book about, you sometimes imagine what your life would have been had you stayed in Peshawar, had the partition not happened. What would the life of the 3 sisters would have been different?
A lot has changed also in Pakistan. A lot has changed. People are not always in burqas and things like that. Only when they have religious functions, they are in burqas. Or if they are privately, I don't know, because I don't have any very intimate circle. But I have friends, and I'm sure Ghazala is online. Ghazala Shahid, her husband used to be the High Commissioner here. Then I hope Samina Pirzada is there, and 1 or 2 other friends. Yusuf Salahuddin is there, and my children must be online also. And it's changed a lot. So,
right. And yet, what was very surprising for me, something which I didn't know at all, that you mentioned that your mother, when they would go to the Gurdwara, would be using the burqa
yes,
in the pre-partition times, which is not something that one
even
has.
Even my sister.
Yes.
So I have not worn the burqa. I wore it when I went to Peshawar this time, when I went for a visit, because Sham dhal rahi thi, and I wanted to climb the clock tower. First, we went right up to Jamrod, where Jamrod chief was Papa's friend who helped him pass uh, into um, into India. But uh, at that day, I wore the burqa, but I didn't cover my face. I just wore it when I went up to the clock tower. It's a very busy place, the Kisahani Bazaar. In fact, Raj Kapoor's family, Prithvi uncle, whom I used to call Prithvi Mamaji, they used to stay there. Dilip Kumar stayed there. Shah Rukh Khan's father stayed there. They still have their houses there. So that's where the clock tower is, Kisahani Bazaar.
Indraji, I would like to now move to something which perhaps would be really instructive for some of us young people as far as learning about relationships. Throughout your book, you talk about the absence of your father from your life. You feel his absence, particularly at difficult periods of your life. And I quote, you say that where was our father who gave us birth and brought us into this cruel world? Why had we lost the support and safety of his presence? In Peshawar, we would meet him every week. In India, he lived in Delhi with his new family. Why are we not able to see him? And yet, you later on in life have overcome that, maybe resentment or bitterness, if at all there was any. And you have translated his poetry and his
I have
work.
started to have done some, which is already in my book, and I hope to do many more.
Yeah. So if you could talk a little bit about what is it that helped you to overcome that, sense of absence, his absence, and being able to forgive him, if
See, I think
that's the right word.
in every family, Seema, you will note that the daughters are closer to the father than the sons. In every family. बाप की जो बेटियां हैं are more, I mean, his favorites always. So we miss that, even though our grandfather was so wonderful to us. I mean, he would give his arm for us. He did. He died very early. He died at 59. I mean, both of them died so early. They could not bear the partition. They could not bear their new identities. They could not bear their rootlessness of who they were. They didn't identify with this new life. But I met my father for the first time when I was 16. I was going to Simla, and my grandfather's friends, the Sardar Pratap Singh Dhingra, invited us sisters to come to Simla, and that's the first venture we ever had, outside of Kanpur, and we stayed with the Horas, our family, my Nanaji's cousin, Mrs. Hora. We used to call her Mano Buaji, and no decision could be taken in our family till Mano Buaji approved. So we went and stayed with her just at the back of the cottage emporium, the old cottage emporium that was, and Queensway, Uspe. We were there, and Buaji said that your father wants to meet you. So the first thing that Didi did is start crying. She used to start crying for everything, Now, I didn't know what that meant, that your father wants to meet you. So I just kept looking at her. And then a time was fixed and we were supposed to go to Gaylord's. The restaurant, Gaylord's, if you all remember, it used to be next to Regal. And we were supposed to reach there at 4:30. I think हम दोनों 3:30 बजे पहुंच गए और वहां चले गए पहले तो the whole Gaylord itself was very daunting. It was such a huge hall with 100 tables set for tea, you know, and the smell of cakes and pastries and bakery and all that. It was very frightening for me. So I got hold of Didi's hand and I said, let's stand at the door. So we went back to the door of the Gaylords, and there, Siva, for the first time in my life, I was trembling. I think I was trembling because every Sikh that passed, we looked at each other. ये हमारा बाप तो नहीं है. So that sense of pain, that sense of separation, I felt at that time. And then yet, when he came, and we all hugged. And we knew it was him. And then we don't know how, but we were all three of us sitting at a table. And all three of us were crying. Even I was crying. Didi was howling. And my father was trying to control, but he was sort of wiping his tears with his handkerchief. And then Didi asked him, just to break the ice, how's Dadi? And they started talking and I was listening. Then Didi asked him, why don't you meet us? Why have you stopped meeting us ever since partition happened? But he says, मैं दो कश्तियों में सवार नहीं हो सकता. मैं डूब जाऊंगा. Till then, I'd heard a little about him, that he writes poetry. And I was wanting to read more about him. Then I read him. And I forgave him for a lot of things. And I think I have not inherited my grandfather's properties and zamine and all sorts of things that he had piled up for us three sisters. But in my blood, I inherited my father's poetry. I have no rancor. He was a very well-known person, as you must have read in that famous Sikh personalities. He comes under the 100 famous Sikh personalities. He wrote the total patency law of India, and he was an expert at UN affairs. He was a brilliant man. I read his poetry almost every day. And I think the kind of man he is, or the kind of man he was, can be no hatred.
मैं बस आपकी कुछ दो लाइनें पढ़ना चाहूंगी, इंदिरा जी, आप इजाजत दें तो.
जी, शौक से.
दिल के बेचैन जजीरों में उतर जाएगा.
जी.
दर्द आंखों के मुकद्दर का पता लाएगा. आंखों के मुकद्दर का पता लाएगा. मेरे बिछड़े हुए लम्हात सजाकर रखना. वक्त लफ्जों में गजल बन के ठहर जाएगा. And so your poetry, which you inherited from your father, has probably provided a refuge, perhaps healing, expression of and maybe joy and anguish and hope and your resilience.
Seema, it is strange that you chose these 4 lines because this ghazal of mine has been chosen for dedication to Farida Khan.
Oh my God.
And it is on YouTube every day. It is being sung by Rochna Dahanapar.
मैंने तो सिर्फ कि मुझे लगा कि your poetry is giving you that space where you can.
Poetry has been my friend.
Yes.
Poetry has been very close to me. It is not a relief. No, it's not a relief. But it's like 2 सहेलियां बैठ के बात कर लेती हैं, 2 सहेलियां दुख बांट लेती हैं, 2 सहेलियां एक दूसरे के कपड़े भी पहन लेती हैं, हम चुन्नी भी बांट लेते हैं, मेरी पोइट्री और मैं. मैं अगर कुछ लिख लूं तो मेरा दिल खुश हो जाता है. और कुछ और कहा था मीनाक्षी ने पढ़ने के
जी
लिए.
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल वही मैं कहने वाली थी कि आप.
This is also again for our 2 countries. कि चांद सूरज आसमां जो है यहाँ वो है वहां. चांद सूरज आसमां जो है यहाँ वो है वहां. रंग खुशबू गुलिस्तां जो है यहाँ वो है वहां. आओ देखें मिलके हम तुम रोशनी के रास्ते. ये चमकती कहकशां जो है यहाँ वो है वहां. कहकशां means the stars, the Milky Range. सरहदों की बंदिशें बस दोस्तों में है फकत. सरहदों की बंदिशें है दोस्ती में है फकत. वरना ये सारा जहां जो है यहाँ है वहां है वहां. जिंदगी की सांस जिससे ढल रही है दोस्तों. जिंदगी की सांस जिससे ढल रही है जो दोस्तों. वो हवाए मेहरबा जो है यहाँ वो है वहां. उनसे कह दो दोस्त बनकर अब रहेंगे हम सभी. चाहतों की कारवां जो है यहाँ वो है. मैंने एक शेर लिखा था
जी.
आफ्टर आई मेट माय फादर. तो मुझे बहुत बाद में समझ में नहीं आई कि मैंने कैसे लिख लिया. एंड आई थिंक कभी कभी कुछ ऐसी चीज बन जाती है कि मैंने लिखा कि हवा से फूल सारे छिल चुके थे. The day I met my father, not that day, but maybe when I came back, हवा से फूल सारे छिल चुके थे. हम अक्सर इस तरह भी मिल चुके थे. So I was meeting him all the time in my dreams, in my poetry, in my daily life. But फूल तो सारे छिल चुके थे. और पर फिर भी हम अक्सर मिल चुके थे.
Thank you, Indraji. I think I took a little more time than Akashlina had permitted for me. So we can open the floor for the audience to ask a few questions. And
एक पोएम मीनाक्षी ने खास कहा था
जी
तासुरात के बारे में. अगर आप आफ्टर यू ओपन द फ्लोर एंड इफ देयर इज टाइम आई विल रीड.
जी. Akashlina, do you have any questions in the chat box that people have put in? Then you can start with those, or if.
May I just jump in here?
We
have several friends from across the border, and we have several poets like Babli and so on who've joined us. And we'd really like to hear what you have to say, because for us it's been a very emotional moment. Emotional, of course, to listen to Indraji, but emotional also to connect with all of you. I know this is the month of Ramadan, and she especially wanted to wish you a Sehri because she said, I will begin when Sehri begins there, and maybe they won't be able to join us. I said, no.
Iftar,
Sorry,
Sehri is
Iftar.
in the morning.
Sorry, Sehri is in the morning. Iftar.
Yes,
And so she was worried.
At 6:30.
That's right. That's
So,
right.
yes.
Sorry, I got it. So she said that, are we being insensitive that they may not be able to join us? And I said, no, I assure you, जो कशिश है वो सबको खींच के ले आएगी. And I think that's what's happened. We all have Dr. Khushbu Ejaz, who's put up her hand and she'd like to share something. And so over to Akash, Leena. And thank you so much, Seema, for having done this beautiful Guftagoo. And I know many people would like to stay on just to listen to Indra ji, but we'll have to plan another special mehfil with her. So after Khushbu, I think Salma Malik from Islamabad also wants to ask. And so over to you, Salma. It's lovely to see you both. Yeah. Over to Khushbu, I think. Yeah. You're muted, Khushbu.
Okay. Namaste, Adab, and Assalamu alaikum from Lahore.
Hello,
Thank
Khushbu.
you,
Adab.
Dr. Bakshi. Hello, Assalamu alaikum.
वालेकुम सलाम खुशबू.
इंदिरा जी, खूबसूरत तहरीर आपकी, और हम आपको अब लाहौर आए हैं तो आपने ज़रूर आना है, हमारे पास कनेड भी आना है. और आप लाहौर आई, आपसे मुलाकात नहीं हो पाई. आपकी खूबसूरत जो आपने अभी आज टॉक दी है, इट्स क्लोज टू आवर हार्ट. जैसे आपने किस्से सुनाए, ऐसे मैं अमृतसर के किस्से सुनते हुए बड़ी हुई हूँ, और अपनी दादी से. और वो लाहौर जो के शालम मार्केट में मेरे दादा की प्रॉपर्टी और दुकान थी, और वो बताते थे कि मुसलमानों के पास कुछ भी नहीं था यहाँ पे, सब कुछ यहाँ पे हिंदुओं के पास था. और कैसे लाला लाजपत राय, आपने रोल्स रॉयस की बात की तो वो सुनाते थे कि 1930 में लाहौर में एक ही कार थी, वो लाला लाजपत राय की थी. तो वो हमें वो सुनाते थे स्टोरी में. बहुत सी खूबसूरत यादें जो हैं, हम उस इलाके से हैं जहाँ पे पार्टीशन का बहुत खून खराबा शायद नहीं, हमारी हिस्ट्री में हमें नहीं सुना, क्योंकि लाहौर में रहे, और मेरी दादी भी 1940 से शादी हो के अमृतसर से आ चुके थे. सो सब खूबसूरत बातें हैं जो कि हैं. मेरी सास से मैंने जो कुछ सुनी है.
खुशबू, मैं आपको टोक रही हूँ बीच में, बहुत एक खूबसूरत चीज मुझे याद आई. मैं पेशावर से कानपुर गई.
अच्छा.
और हसीना मोइन जो आपकी राइटर है
जी,
वो कानपुर से कराची आई.
वाह.
और हम लोग एक ही उम्र के थे, एंड वी बिकेम फ्रेंड्स ऑन फेसबुक. एंड शी वुड आस्क मी कि कानपुर के बेसन के लड्डू अभी भी मिलते हैं मेस्टन रोड पे. Can you imagine? And
Beautiful.
for a very long time, I think she passed away just 2 years back.
Yes.
And we became very good friends. So, there is no rancor.
True.
आपसे आज मुलाकात होकर मेरी को बहुत अच्छा लग रहा है कि
जी सेम है जी. मैं शिमला की अपनी बातें मैं आपको बताऊं कि मेरी सास 7 साल की थी जब वो माइग्रेट करके आई, और वो उनके फादर की उसमें डेथ भी हुई पार्टीशन में. लेकिन वो जो उस टाइम से उन्होंने जो चॉकलेट संभाल के, कुछ रैपर संभाल के रखे हुए थे, जो उनकी डेथ हुई है, तो उन्होंने कहा कि जी मुझे वहां पर शिमला में गोरे साहब को मेरे वालिद जो है वो गोश्त पहुंचाते थे. तो उन्होंने वो अपनी स्टोरी मुझसे शेयर की. तो जब मैं भी आई हूँ 2009 में दिल्ली में, मैं आई हैव मेड सम वेरी गुड फ्रेंड्स, and Meenakshi Gopinath is my all-time favorite, and I used to tell my students as well.
Everybody's favorite.
There is one woman in South Asia which I adore a lot. And when she came to Canada in 2013 on our centennial, so my students, they also endorsed this thing that you were right. So she's so eloquent, and she is instrumental in this regard that she has brought so many of us on the same platform. And I have made very good friends in Kashmir, in Afghanistan, in Nepal, in India, just because of this platform which Seema, Minakshi, Manjri has provided us. So thank you once again to Viscom team, and thank you, Indira ji, for sharing your story with us.
Thank you, Khushbu.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Khushbu. Can I now request Salma ji to?
Thank you so much, Akashlina. So good to see you become part of the Viscom family now. My association with Viscom, I think, runs as far as, I think I was in the second CT workshop. So I'm going to be part of that 25 years anniversary people, and heartiest congratulations to Viscom family for being together for 25 years. It's such a beautiful feeling. And to be very honest, madam, I really can't talk because I have this break in my voice. जो आप बातें कर रही हैं, और my family is not a partition family. My grandparents lived in Pakistan, so we never faced partition. But one of my chachi, my younger paternal uncle's wife, she came as a refugee. My grandfather was in the railways, and she was one of those young ladies who had lost everything, and she came, and as the tradition was, that young unaccompanied ladies, they would be then taken to the station master's house and they would be rescued there. And one thing led to another, and then there was a romance, and my chachi, Fatma auntie, became my chachi. But she carried a deep tragedy, because when she was escaping the Jathas on the other side of the border, her baby was put in a boiling oil, and he died in front of her. And they were dressed up like boys, young girls, to save themselves. And she was separated. The husband died. The baby was killed right in front of her eyes. And she escaped, and she saw everything from the rooftop. Her mother-in-law made it show that these girls could run away. And much later, she was lucky enough to be united or reunited with her elder son, who initially refused to recognize her or acknowledge her because he thought that she had cheated on him. So there's so many things, there's so many shades to this partition, that what we consider as just a divide carries too much into this. जब मैं आपका ये देख रही थी, तो दीपक मरवा जी जो हैं, वो फेसबुक पे एक पेज रन करते हैं पिशोरीज के नाम से.
I'm a member of that.
बिल्कुल, you're a member of that. और उसमें आपका जिक्र है, मैंने वो पोस्ट भी किया है. And I think one of the poems that you have mentioned, दोस्ती का एक समंदर, जहरा निगाह जी का. So this is similar to what Faiz Ahmed Faiz says, हम के ठहरे अजनबी इतनी मुलाकात.
वो बांग्लादेश के ऊपर थी.
जी, but partition है. Partition
Faiz साहब की बेटी सलमा हाशमी is a very dear friend, and
Mashallah.
she would have joined the program today, except she's flying from London to Lahore.
And then if you look at Gulzar ji's poem, हाथ छोड़े भी तो रिश्ते नहीं छोड़ा कर. इन सारों की अल्फाज का चुनाव मुख्तलिफ है, बात एक ही है. Whether it be partition of Pakistan, Bangladesh, it be India, Pakistan, or whatever, the sense of loss, the sense of that comfort zone is very difficult. But आपकी बातों से, I'm sorry, मैं आपकी किताब तो भी नहीं पढ़ सकी. Inshallah, I will look for your book. If it isn't there in our bookshops, तो मैं ज़रूर पढ़ूंगी, वरना anytime I come to India, मैं करूंगी. But आप जो first generation refugees थे, जिन्होंने partition face किया, somehow, I mean, some people were very deeply scarred. Everyone was deeply scarred. But आपने एक बात कही that your mother, your grandfather, they remained quiet. They won't talk about it. The trauma was internalized.
Yes, you can say that in a way. But the only person who went through the partition and somehow reached us was my Nanaji. my grandfather.
Okay.
We as a family had already left Peshawar and
Acha,
saw
Masha.
Lahore burning.
Oh,
That's the
okay.
only thing that I know. I have
Okay.
not mentioned all the turbulence of the partition in my book at all. See, Salma, is it Salma? Yeah.
Ji.
Salma, either we can talk about the partition at a macro level or we can talk at a micro level.
True. True.
I
So what
have
I would
talked,
like to,
I have
sorry.
talked at a micro level about what we three sisters, how we three sisters braved it. I have
Absolutely,
not
Masha.
talked of partition as a whole.
But that is your personal, how you as a 6-year-old, and then later you look back and see. And I think that is so important. And the point that I was trying to make here was that the people who actually face that situation, for
Yes.
them, this living memory has stayed with them so long as they're alive. But unfortunately, in the successive generations, we have made partition a political issue. To divide and rule. And we have taken away that essence that you have brought out in your book, what exactly partition was to the individuals. And I think your book should be a must read for everyone. And as part of a project that I did, and Viscomp is familiar with that, on partition cinema, there is a lot of that reliving of that moment, but from a person who actually experienced it, and that to a young lady. And looking at the situation, जब आपने ये कहा कि one night you people went without food, it was so difficult. But at the same time, मेरी वालदा ये कहती थी कि उस वक्त हम सब बहुत गरीब हो गए थे,
बिल्कुल।
और उस गुर्बत में हम सब ने एक दूसरे की बड़ी मदद की थी। वो जो डिवाइड थी, जहाँ एक तरफ हम हिंदू मुस्लिम के नाम पे एक दूसरे को मार रहे थे, उसी डिवाइड में the Hindus leaving for India were giving the Muslims their daughters and their wealth to keep them secure till such time that either they return
True.
or situation is good enough कि वो अपनी चीजें ले लें. And I think likewise was happening across the border. So this was such a strange situation. और मेरे ख्याल में हमारी इन generations को, जहाँ हम एक दूसरे को बिल्कुल नहीं जानते, और अब खास तौर पे मेरे ख्याल में any time that I came to India in the last years, अब मुझे 10 साल हो गए, and that too the last time I came to India was courtesy Dr. Gopinath. And Viscomp is my home. Delhi is very familiar to me. मैं लोगों को रास्ते बताती हूँ दिल्ली में कि कौन सी जगह कहाँ जाना है, और अभी आप
How
नीता
nice.
मंसूर साहब का नाम ले रही थी.
How
So they were
nice.
friends with my uncle and auntie because they were also diplomats, Abbas Haider Zaidi and Zohra. So I mean, like, it's a small family. अगर हम देखें तो बहुत ये सर्कल बड़ा shrink कर जाता है. But at the same time, ये भी मैंने देखा है, the last time I came and any time I would come to India, मुझे हमेशा वीजे के इशू होता था. Wherever the formal links don't work, और आप formal तरीके से एक दूसरे के लिए जिंदगी मुश्किल बनाने की कोशिश करते हैं. And I'm sorry for those who do not understand Urdu. I'm encouraged by Madam Verma because she is so good at Urdu कि हमारी उर्दू भी इतनी अच्छी नहीं है. There are always the same people who use unofficial channels to facilitate. The last time, Seema can vouch for me, I was refused to board the flight because of a very small grammatical error. And then I took the land route and I crossed the Vaga. And the same people who were supposed to man and not allow us to cross over into each other's areas were the people who were facilitating that passage that day. And this happens all the time. I think this happens at an everyday situation, I being one of the beneficiaries of that. But मैं आपको ये request करूँगी, Viscomp को ये request करूँगी कि please allow us. I'm based in Islamabad. I teach at a university called Qaid-e-Azam University. That we can set up a session, and we would like to have. अगर तो आप पाकिस्तान आती हैं तो इससे बढ़ के हमारे लिए कोई खुश नसीबी नहीं होगी. But so long as that you cannot travel, let's have an online book read the way you have, and we would like to hear your experience. And I would very much want that my students learn from you and they find out that partition is not just a national buildings narrative. It is something that had real people. It's not a movie. It is not a movie जहाँ दोनों साइड के हीरोज अपने अपने झंडे लगा रहे हैं और बहुत सा सॉन्ग एंड डांस हो रहा है और at the end of the day you get the heroine after 3 hours of tension. It is something much beyond it. It's a living memory, and that's important.
Yes,
I'm sorry, I'm
and
out of time.
the sooner we do it, the better.
Ji,
Because
bilkul,
some of
absolutely.
us who are left yet are the children of partition. We are the children of partition.
Absolutely.
And some of us can still contribute to the feelings or to the pathos or to the event that took place, that we can call it now an event, because like on my launch, a lot of nice people spoke and they said all of us have historical amnesia. We forget. So, we must not let people forget.
Absolutely.
We don't need to show scars. We don't need to show our wounds, but we must not forget.
Ma'am, I think, yes, scars and wounds may look negative, but yes,
Yes.
the memories need to be passed on in a beautiful manner that you have actually curated. And just one last point, and then I will close shop because I know there are a lot of people waiting here. My husband is a Hara. He is from Peshawar.
Oh.
And
Salam
so
alaikum to him.
I'll certainly pass on your greetings to him. Walaikum assalam. And me being a Punjabi, I was really intrigued by the inner city, and there were Banuris who lived in the inner city. So he took me to Peshawar when we were not married during the COVID, and that is the time when you were writing your book.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
yeah. So I went through the Androon Sheher,
Oh,
and I went through all the gates, which they have totally destroyed. They have destroyed the actual essence of the gate. They have made it all brick and mortar.
we used to live in the Ashtanagri Darwaza, inside the Ashtanagri
So
Darwaza.
we were at the Hasht Nagri and we went to the clock tower, and I found it very
wow.
fascinating. Yes, so I just wanted to tell you this, that I never knew that this clock tower, whose photos that I'm clicking and I'm standing before it, and I was wearing a chadar, I was not wearing a burqa, by the way. And all the men in the food street were totally intrigued by this female who was there broad daylight clicking photos like crazy with a man. I was really wondering how beautiful this place is. And I'm so honored. And thank you, Viscom, for providing us this opportunity. So here is this connection between several generations. And thank you so much, madam. And thank you, Viscom. All the best.
Thank you, Salma.
Thank you so much, Salmaji. And I'm also at a lots of words, but I'll request if there's anybody else who would ask questions, you can use the raise hand option. Till then, may I request Anjali Bhatia, Dr. Anjali Bhatia, to share a few reflections.
Greetings, Indira ji, MG, Viscom at 25, friends. So I'd like to enter the conversation sideways from a remove. Sideways from the left or the right, but that I shan't reveal because in the election year, the ballot is secret. And as I'm thinking, I'd like to enter this conversation by invoking a certitude of human existence. And I think among the great certitudes and the few certitudes of human existence is experience. It is a universal, but at the same time, it has particular lives. And experience would have remained an individuated certitude had particular experiences of individuals not converged. The convergence of experiences is a creation of history or histories. And in this sense, convergence is possible only when individuals share their experiences by speaking about them orally or in their writing. So Indira ji, lest we forget, has brought about a convergence, first and foremost. You've converged biography with social history, experience with memory. You've channelized involuntary memory of experiencing history, and you're urging us to hold it as a voluntary memory. Yes, MG, it is Proust's remembrance of things past. And it is also Kipling's Lest We Forget. It is a call to action, Indiraji. This book is a tribute to the generation that had to bear the cross, was crucified, only to be resurrected. Happy Good Friday to everyone.
Will you please repeat this again? What did you say? Just the last two sentences?
I said this is a tribute to, thank God I wrote it down. It is a tribute to the generation that had to bear the cross, was crucified, only to be resurrected. And then I said, Happy Good Friday.
You said it so rightly. You said it so rightly, Anjali. Thank you.
Viscom's Book Café, Akashlina, in organizing this discussion, has taken our convergence to another level of meaningfulness. It has widened the circle of the converged by pulling into historical experience of particular individuals. You've pulled those who haven't experienced the partition, but who now feel its pain, its trauma, and the joy of that pain. Viscomp, MG, the strings of our memory stand seduced. Not by Oppenheimer's Oscar-winning nuclear fission, but by the saga of history's social fission. Indiraji, thank you for showing us what one can do with experience of trauma. For center staging, 3 sisters, 3 women, and for creating a context for a reading public for generations to come.
Thank you, Anjali. Thank you.
Viscomp, thank you for providing a platform for this convergence, for regaining time, and for handshakes across borders and boundaries. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts.
Thank you, Anjali.
Thank you so much. I'm also sorry, at lots of words at this stage, and I can just think about what Indira ji just recited right now, that सरहदों की बंदिशें है मगर मैं अपना ही लाइन जोड़ रही हूँ अभी, माफ कीजिएगा, मगर हमारे पास अभी दोस्ती है और इस दोस्ती से ही शायद हम सरहदों की बंदिशों को पार करेंगे. Indira ji, we do have a lot of people who have a lot of questions, but maybe I'll take one question which was there, which is also very personal, is what would be your advice to younger generations in India, Pakistan, and across the diaspora? How would you want, because just as Anjali ma'am spoke about, it's a call to action. I felt it's a responsibility that we have to take on, which your book have given to us. What would you say?
Akashlina, I must not say anything against our country or against any country. I would not be a good citizen if I did. I would like to be friends with the world. When I was in the travel industry, when I joined the travel industry, do you know that all that we had to do was go to the airport, buy a ticket and go to Germany or go to Canada. No visas were ever required. Now, at this point, I don't think you can put a foot outside India without a visa. So let's, I think time has come. We've got such great leaders worldwide at the moment. Wars should be stopped. All these conflicts should be stopped. In my book, I've written that at any given time, there are about 47 to 48 wars going on all the time. I'm not too sure if it is still in the book or if the publisher has edited that chapter. But definitely, we इतनी छोटी सी जिंदगी लेके हम लोग आते हैं. कुछ लोग तो बहुत जल्दी चले जाते हैं, कुछ लोग को मौका मिलता है, लेकिन रहने का या जीने का तो व्हाट आर वी फाइटिंग फॉर? सब कुछ तो यहीं रह जाना है. दोस्ती का हाथ बढ़ाएं, खुश रहें, एक्सचेंज होने चाहिए, एक्सचेंज प्रोग्राम्स होने चाहिए जैसे पहले होते थे. एंड दैट्स हाउ द वर्ल्ड विल प्रोग्रेस. अदरवाइज हम लड़ते ही रहेंगे सारा वक्त. क्या मिलेगा हमें? कुछ नहीं मिलेगा. पुश्तें निकल जाती हैं लड़ते लड़ते, लेकिन मिलता तो कुछ भी नहीं है. प्रकाश लेना.
जी जी इंदिरा जी, कुछ कहने के लिए लफ्ज नहीं है, शायद इसीलिए रुकी हुई थी, क्योंकि आपने बहुत कुछ सोचने दिया है आज और बहुत कुछ सोचने के लिए है
मैंने
हमारे
पहले भी ये कहा था कि इस पार्टीशन में हम क्यों ऐसी चीज हुई. मैंने अपने एक लॉन्च में मैंने एक छोटी सी सदात हुसैन मंटो की एक कहानी से 2 लाइनें पढ़ी थी. वो था कि 1 लाख मुसलमान मरा तो कोई कहता है जी 1 लाख हिंदू मरा. भाई ये भी तो कह सकते थे कि 2 लाख इंसान मरे. ये हिंदू और मुसलमान मरने का क्या है? और उनका उस तादाद का कोई कहीं गिनती नहीं है, कहीं कहीं मैनिफेस्टेड नहीं है, कहीं रजिस्टर्ड नहीं है कि ये मरे, ये मरे, ये मरे. जस्ट नाउ आई थिंक सलमा और अंजू, Mrs. Bhatia just said millions died. Even Manakshi said millions died. लेकिन उनके नाम किसी को पता है? किसी को नहीं पता. जी आकाश देना, आपके लिए मैं छोटा सा शेर लिखूंगी.
So before we bring this evening, very reluctantly, to closure, I was wondering if you would like to leave us with a nazam. I don't want you to talk about the last poem, which is the loneliness of aging, but something else that we had discussed.
आपने तासुरात कहा था.
जी, जी.
Do you think it will go with this end, or should I read something? You want me to read Tasurat?
Tasurat and anything else that you would like to end with. Thank you.
This is when I saw the clock tower and I came back and wrote a little bit. इसकी मैं आपको 2-3 स्टैंजा सुनाती हूँ और उन्हीं के फिर मैं ट्रांसलेशंस भी सुनाऊंगी. हसरते बीत ने एक चीज पुरानी देखी, अपने अजदाद के वक्तों की निशानी देखी. एक इमारत की जबानी जो कहानी देखी. दीदाए शौक बरसने लगे लहरों जैसे, वक्त के सांस पे बहते हुए घंटों जैसे. It's क्लॉक टावर, घंटा घर that I'm talking about, तो मैंने ये शेर खास लिखा था। दीदाए शौक बरसने लगे लहरों जैसे, वक्त के सांस पे बहते हुए घंटों जैसे। किस कदर सोज में डूबा हवा, किस कदर सोज में डूबा हवा हुआ लम्हा आया, कुछ बुजुर्गों की दुआओं का भी तोहफा आया, मेरे एहसास में एक ऐसा सरापा आया। Let me translate these 3 paras, and if you want me to continue, I will. Driven by a desire, I saw something from the past. I saw a memorial from the times of my ancestors. I saw the story narrated by the monument. The desire to see swirled around me like waves, like a bell tolling on the instrument of time. किस कदर सोच में डूबा हुआ लम्हा आया, कुछ बुजुर्गों की दुआओं का भी तोहफा आया, मेरे एहसास में एक ऐसा सरापा आया, जिसने शफकत से बड़े प्यार से चूमा मुझको, जिसने शफकत से बड़े प्यार से चूमा मुझको, ऐ मेरी लहते जिगर कह के पुकारा मुझको। May I explain this? How steeped in lament and emotions was that moment. How the gift of my elders' prayers appeared before me. An image arose in my consciousness, which kissed me with such love and tenderness. Oh, part of my heart, it called me. और भी चेहरे कुछ मेरे घराने वाले, नाज करते बहुत जिन पे जमाने वाले, आज भी देख के कहते हैं सब आने वाले। किस कदम पाक ज़मीं पर है बसेरा तेरा, सुरमई शाम मुनव्वर है सवेरा तेरा। गर्दिशे वक्त ने बदला है लम्हों को, गर्दिशे वक्त के बदलते लम्हों को सलाम, तेरी धड़कनों से निकलते हुए नगमों को सलाम। होके मैं तुझ पे फिदा करती हूँ राहों को सलाम, अपने अजदाद के ताबिंदा इमारत को सलाम। उसकी बेलौस मोहब्बत के हकीकत को सलाम। There were other faces too of my family, on whom the world set much store, so all those who came to see it. Your home is on such a pure land. A serene evening and a radiant morning awaits you. My salutations to the changing cycles of times. My salutations to the songs and emanating from your heartbeats. My salutations to the paths that led me to you. My salutations to the resplendent monument of my past. My salutations to the selfless love and faith of my ancestors.
Thank you, Indraji. As you can see, there's a very eloquent silence that I'm sure everybody is sharing while acknowledging your strength, your resilience, your courage, and above all, the audacity of hope that I spoke about before, and your deep humanity. Very often we're familiar with this quote that what you leave behind are not what is engraved in monuments of stone, but what is woven into the lives of others. But here, ironically, is a monument that speaks about weaving this tapestry of life for you. So in a sense, you're going back to Peshawar was about reweaving the web of life. So from all of us here today, and I speak on behalf of all of us who are present, I'd like to say thank you for being you. Thank you for being our friend. And thank you. May your pen continue to be as powerful as it is. And may the sweet resonance of your articulations continue to touch many lives as it has done ours. And thanks to all our friends for being here and this very holy month especially. We miss you all. We will reconnect. We will continue to meet. And inshallah, it will be sooner rather than later. I also want to thank Akashlina and especially Seema, without whom none of this would have been possible.
Me too. I would like to thank everybody from WISCOM and everybody who joined in from everywhere across the borders.